On today's show, can head coach Spencer Carbery be that coach to unlock Pierre Luc Dubois?
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the Sirius XM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about a player that's looking for a bounce back season. A guy that could be a really huge piece for this team if he can be as advertised or what we've thought of him historically. That player, of course, is Pierre Luc Dubois. Alex Ovechkin mentioned that he lacked chemistry with the centers that he played with last season. Can Pierre Luc Dubois be that guy to jumpstart Alex Ovechkin and get him going on the right foot? We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about his time with the Kings. Ultimately, I think was a blip on the radar. That I don't think that necessarily that the chemistry with the Kings and the head coaching and the GM, it just wasn't the right fit for PLD in the City of Angels. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about how Spencer Carbery, the carburetor, has a lot to prove to be the guy to unlock Pierre Luc Dubois. And one of the things that Elliot Friedman said in the 32 Thoughts podcast is this could very well be PLD's last opportunity. What does that all mean? We'll talk about that. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about how Matt Rempe, was back in the district. But just to get it going here, talking about that piece, that trade that was made this past summer for Pierre Luc Dubois, that, of course, we know sent Darcy Kemper out to the Kings in return. The Capitals took a big bite out of that PLD apple as he will be on this team for quite some time. A risky move. And one of the things that former GM Brian McClellan did say were risky moves. And if you're an everydayer of the show, you know I spoke about why they were risky moves because these are players that they have room for growth, shall we say. When you heard about the trade for Pierre Luc Dubois from the Kings to the Capitals, inevitably, you probably heard some insiders questioning it. More recently, I heard Frank Saravalli talk about that, kind of seeing is believing it with him. But then I've heard different things, that Elliot Friedman is kind of hopeful that Washington will be the right environment. But is that going to be the case? I think that ultimately that is what we're hoping for. But as we take a look at his time with the Kings, like I talked about, I just think that it was a mismatch with systems. I just don't think it was the right fit. I think that the Capitals could be the right team. I think that Spencer Carbery could be the right head coach to coax out that inner great Pierre Luc Dubois. The Capitals are counting on it, as they will have him under contract for quite some time. And then the questions abound. The things that we don't want to ask are, what are we going to do in the event that it doesn't work out, being that he is under contract for a long, long time? Definitely now I think it comes into focus why BMAC called these risky moves. But let's talk about his time with the Kings. And, again, I don't think that anyone would argue with the fact that it wasn't his best season. He had planned on making that his home for quite some time. That is why he agreed and signed to that long contract with the Kings, but it just didn't materialize. And so let's talk about that. PLD's experience with the Kings. Pierre Luc Dubois had high hopes when he signed an 8-year contract as a signed trade deal with the LA Kings, but his tenure with the team lasted only 1 year before he was traded to the Capitals. In a recent interview with La Presse's Matthias Brunet, Dubois opened up about the challenges he faced in LA and his eagerness to establish himself with the Capitals. Again, you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce that, but that's what he's looking for. And I think that's what the Capitals are looking for. They are looking for, and I think they have found, or they believe they found, that center that is going to be the guy that is going to have good chemistry with Alex Ovechkin, as we know, who is chasing down Wayne Gretzky. And I think that if he has a player, a center that's going to help him in that effort, I think all the better. For many seasons, and we know that it was Nick Backstrom and Alex Ovechkin. Well, we know that Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey indefinitely, most likely will never play hockey again. There needed to be that center to help fill that void. And one of the things that Brian McClellan did that was risky, and I agree with what he did, is he didn't mortgage the farm. He didn't give up a bunch of prospects. He didn't give up a bunch of draft picks to get some new shiny toy. It was tempting out there. There was Gensel, there was Marchessault, there was Stamkos, those kind of players out there. But he did the right thing by picking up, and trading with the Kings for a player that has a pretty good upside. Because if we take a look at the back of his hockey card, I know it's easy to kind of just concentrate on the negativity. And there was no real positivity from him last season. In the 23-24 season, in 82 games played, 16 goals, 24 assists. But if we want to rewind time, one season in the 22-23 season, 73 games, 27 goals, 36 assists. The 21-22 season, 81 games, 28 goals, 32 assists. Some downtime with the Jets in the 2021 season and the Blue Jackets in the 2021 season. But before that, he also had signs of greatness as well. Most in particular here, the 2018-2019 season with Columbus, where he had 27 goals and 34 assists. So if you're going to generalize his time in playing professional hockey, whether it be with Columbus, Winnipeg, or the Kings, it's been a successful one. Still a young guy, the way we talk about him, you'd swear that he was this grizzled old vet that's like 35 years old looking for, his way out and to kind of ride out into the sunset, but a young man at the end of the day. And again, if I'm going to generalize what kind of player he is, I think all things considered, a pretty good upside, just kind of, I think, a bad fit with the Kings. So talking about challenges and disappointment in LA, reflecting on his time with the Kings, Dubois expressed disappointment at not being able to settle down for the long term as he had anticipated, despite his proven track record as a skilled forward, which includes back-to-back 60-point seasons with the Winnipeg Jets. Dubois found himself struggling to meet expectations during his time with the Kings. His modest production of 40 points in 82 games, along with concerns about his effort and attitude, made his stint in LA a challenging experience. And there was frustration also, from the highest level. Rob Blake, the GM for the Kings, it was something that I was listening to on that 32 Thoughts podcast, where he even put the skates on, the GM himself, and took out to the ice and was saying, hey, we need to see a whole lot more production from you. And I think it was a bitter thing for the GM for the Kings, as he is the guy that signed that deal, or he is the one that orchestrated that contract, and PLD signed on that line, that they really took a big bite out of the apple. The Kings did, and it kind of bit him in the butt. But what did Robert Blake do? He did the right thing and made it right. He was able to work with former GM Brian McClellan. The Kings were looking for a netminder. We had Darcy Kemper, which we weren't too pleased with. And that's how this whole thing happened. But as Capitals fans, I think the only thing that you can do is take the positive attitude. I think that there's a pretty good upside. And at the end of the day, there are no sure things. Talking about factors contributing to his difficulties, Dubois acknowledged that the lack of clear expectations from the coaching staff contributed to his internal discord and hindered his ability to find his footing with the team, leading to self-doubt, although he admitted to having a distant relationship with former Kings coach Todd McClellan. Dubois took responsibility for his performance and acknowledged that he might have been overly demanding in seeking guidance from the coaching staff. So I think a bit self-reflective. I think that he realized that maybe his attitude did need some adjusting. And hey, I mean, we're all human, and I think that he is a guy that is coming from a lot of success in his hockey career. So for him to struggle, I think was probably frustrating, and I think that he probably took it out on the coaching staff. And I think he was just being candid there, saying that I was maybe overly demanding, and that he also felt that. When we take a look at the Kings, ambiguous, that they didn't really know. He didn't know what to expect from that team. He also said that he is a guy that doesn't see gray too well. He's a very black and white guy, and he did not understand what was expected from him from the Kings organization. I think that at the end of the day, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I think that all we can hope for is that he can hit the ground running. Everything that we've seen thus far from camp is that he has been as advertised, a great skater, has a great shot. I think that on paper, he will be really, really good. So talking about his outlook and his future with the Capitals, despite the difficulties he faced in LA, Dubois remains optimistic about his future with the Capitals and is eager to make a positive impact with his new team. That is our hope as well, that he can have a rebound season and can find his former glory. I think that it's in there somewhere. And the good thing is that Spencer Carbery has a rapport with these kind of players. And one of the things that was also spoke about in that podcast was Rasmus Sandin and just how well that Spencer Carbery deals with these young players and these players that are considered reclamation projects. Can Spencer Carbery do that? Can he be the guy that unlocks the inner talents of Pierre Luc Dubois? For me, I think he is the right coach at the right time, and I'll discuss straight ahead. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me, as we know the NFL season has started. And if you follow a team that's out of your market, well, you understand the advantages of having NFL Sunday Ticket and a pretty sweet deal through FanDuel to take advantage of that. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So that was one of the things that Elliot Friedman spoke of, that this could potentially be PLD's last opportunity. And it's interesting that the Capitals moved on from another guy that was a bit of a head case, I guess I'm going to say, and Evgeny Kuznetsov. And now they have another guy that maybe has some issues to deal with, whether it be on the ice, off the ice, attitude, that kind of thing. And we saw what kind of results that Spencer Carbery had with Evgeny Kuznetsov. But at the end of the day, I think you have to have the right player that is willing to take your advice. I think that Evgeny Kuznetsov had his own issues, but it's going to be another challenge similar, I think, to that with Pierre Luc Dubois. I think that the upside for PLD is, I think that the talent is there. I think he has the willingness to learn and to overcome and be that better player. That is what we're hoping for. And that's what I was talking about before the break there, is I think that Spencer Carbery is the right coach at the right time for Pierre Luc Dubois. But he has experience like that, which I spoke of with Rasmus Sandin. Spencer Carbery's approach to Rasmus Sandin's exit meeting offers insight into how he could handle Pierre Luc Dubois to reach his full potential. Rasmus Sandin shared an insightful story about his exit meeting with Carbery, where they both honestly assessed Sandin's performance and discussed areas for improvement. One of the things that he asked Rasmus Sandin is he said, "What kind of season do you think that you had?" And he said, "Not too good." And Spencer Carbery said, "I agree. And here's some things that we're going to work on next season to get you back where you're at." And one of the things that was tactful about him is that it was the postseason interviews, and Rasmus Sandin kind of pushed it off, or they had an agreement that they would get in touch in a couple of weeks, and that kind of just shows that rapport, that understanding between a coach and a player. That maybe he understood that Rasmus Sandin wasn't ready to open up about it at that given moment, but to give him a couple of weeks to be reflective, to maybe take stock of yourself and say, what really worked for Rasmus the player. I think that is what really makes head coach Spencer Carbery a great and understanding coach. But talking about Pierre Luc Dubois and the Capitals roster changes, the Capitals roster has seen significant changes with key departures and notable additions reshaping the team. Of these changes, the acquisition of Pierre Luc Dubois stands out as potentially the most transformative move, given his proven ability to score goals and accumulate points. However, concerns about his attitude and effort make him a challenging project for the coaching staff. Sportsnet's hockey insider Elliot Friedman believes that Dubois' opportunity with the Capitals represents his last shot, quote unquote, in the NHL. And that was quite an interesting take by Elliot Friedman, which I spoke of in the first segment, that he's bounced around a little bit. He's played on a few different teams. But if you want to just take a look at him statistically speaking, if you take a look at the back of his hockey card, not too bad. I think that's maybe a little bit of a hard take by Elliot Friedman. But I understand it, that, teams don't like players that have perceived attitude problems. And they definitely don't like players that don't get the production on the ice that they had hoped for. When the Kings, made that big deal with PLD, they were hoping for a lot, and they got a lot less than that. So I understand the frustration from his former teams, and ultimately I think is why Elliot Friedman came to that assessment, even though maybe a little bit of a hard take. Talking about Pierre Luc Dubois' potential and what went wrong with the Kings. Dubois is in the fourth organization, is considered a highly intriguing figure. Dubois is known to have a lot of potential, and coach Spencer Carbery is highly regarded for his ability to develop players. If Carbery can't bring out the best in Dubois, it might be his last opportunity to prove himself. With the pressure and expectation surrounding him, Dubois needs to step up, especially considering his long-term contract. That was the biggest thing for me, that I was like, eek, I don't know. If there was any reservations that I had, it was about the term of his contract, the amount of it as well. But we also know that Darcy Kemper's contract is no longer on the books. But that's, again, that was the Capitals pushing all their chips in on a guy that has a lot of question marks around him. Now, for me, I'm taking the optimistic foot there. I'm going to believe that he's going to be a great player, but I want to see evidence of that out on the ice before I make my true assessment that this guy is going to be as advertised, or that he is on a rebound and heading in the right direction. Coach Spencer Carbery has expressed his optimism and enthusiasm for the opportunity to revitalize this highly skilled player. He remains optimistic about the potential of the newly acquired player, emphasizing the support that the team environment and coaching staff have. Carbery aims to optimize the player's performance and unlock their full potential through dedicated daily efforts. I don't think that Spencer Carbery is going to give up on this guy. He really can't at this point. And I think that, potentially he could be that guy that the Capitals have been looking for a while. This last season, we saw Dylan Strome on that top line center. We've seen other guys cycle through, that maybe this can be the guy that's going to have chemistry with Alex Ovechkin again. And, I'm not going to anoint him as that top line, first line center. I think that Dylan Strome is going to battle for that position as well. But it's going to make it interesting. And like I say, at this point right now, as training camp is next week here already, that it's a storyline to follow. And those are just the two players. Those are the two centers that come to mind. There could be someone at camp that kind of takes everyone by surprise. But as of right now, I think that it's going to be him. It's going to be a dogfight between Strome and PLD, and let the best man win. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about a player that was in town here recently and a guy I'm not too fond of. His name is Matt Rempe. Maybe it rings a bell. I'll talk about him straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Matt Rempe, that name rings a bell, doesn't it? Oh yeah, he was that goon. He was that tough guy that the Capitals faced in the playoffs last spring. And we remember he was this tough guy that, kind of touted himself as this tough guy, and you don't want to mess with me, even though that Tom Wilson approached him and he kind of cowered away with this little grin on his face, like, nah, I don't want any part of this. One of the things that he mentioned when Sammy Silver, I believe, was interviewing him, was that it didn't serve his purposes, that the Rangers were ahead in the game, and why should I drop the mitts and risk losing a game just because Tom Wilson wants to fight me? And I understand that thought process. However, this is also the same Matt Rempe that would like to skate up to guys before games started, the tough guys on the opposing team, and say, hey, you want to fight a little bit later in the game? So to say that he wanted the fights to happen organically, I don't think is 100% accurate. But anyway, that's his story, and he's sticking to it. At the end of the day, I'm hoping that Tom Wilson and Matt Rempe can get acquainted this upcoming season, if you know what I'm talking about. But that was the big thing, an action-packed playoff series during the 23-24 NHL season. The first-round playoff series between the Caps and Rangers featured intense moments, particularly due to the actions of Rangers player Matt Rempe, known for his aggressive play. Rempe's hit in Game 3 resulted in injuries to TVR and TJ Oshie. Despite the impact of these plays, Rempe did not face any disciplinary action from the NHL. And of course, it's all coming back to me. That is why I had a problem with him, is that he injured two bigger players on the Capitals in the form of TVR, which depleted the blue line, and TJ Oshie, of course, that we know is a great forward, a great playmaker. And Tom Wilson was trying to do right by his team and act as the future captain of this team and try to even the score a little bit, as Tom Wilson is the tough guy for our team, the Capitals, of course. But, well, Matt Rempe did not want anything of it. So Tom Wilson and Matt Rempe, Capitals enforcer Wilson, attempted to engage in a fight with Rempe during Game 3, but Rempe refused, citing the team's lead in the series and the game as reasons for his decision. Maybe. And, I'm not going to say that Rempe is, in fact, not a tough guy, but I still think that Tom Wilson can handle him, and I think that that could have been a momentum shift. Do I think it would have been enough for the Capitals to win the series? I'm not saying that, but I think that oftentimes in games of that magnitude, or even during the regular season, if you can shift the momentum with a really great fight, sometimes that can be a really key moment. Wilson, on the other hand, expressed his willingness to engage in a fight with Rempe, emphasizing the importance of standing up for his teammates, especially in response to what he perceived as borderline hits. And these were not met with any disciplinary action, and Tom Wilson wanted to level the score. Anticipated tensions in future matchups. The tension between the two teams is likely to continue in the 24-25 season with 3 scheduled matchups between the Caps and the Rangers. It is anticipated that the altercation may occur, especially if Wilson is open to fighting. However, Wilson hinted the playoff meeting might have been Rempe's only opportunity to engage with him. And one of the things that I heard Tom Wilson talk about with Mike Vogel on the Break the Ice podcast is that he doesn't play those games necessarily anymore, that he doesn't feel the need to engage in fights with everyone. He knows who he is. And it was his, perception that I am best served being on the ice, helping the team score goals. I'm not helping my team out if I'm spending a lot of time in the penalty box. And oftentimes, it was just fourth line guys looking to make a name for themselves. So they're like, hey, I'm going to make a name for myself and gain favor with my team by picking a fight with a tough guy on the Capitals. So, I think that Tom Wilson is wise to it. I think that he's a whole lot more mature now, and he realizes that he doesn't have to be a Reeves. He doesn't have to be a Maroon. He doesn't need to be that junkyard dog, one trick pony, that he knows that he can score goals. He knows what he means to this team. And if a fight happens, it happens. I don't think that Tom Wilson is going to seek out a fight with Rempe unless he is being chippy again and maybe taking on some Capitals players. But other than that, I don't think that Tom Wilson feels the need to make a name for himself. Matt Rempe, he still has a lot to prove with the Rangers organization. He still has to prove that he's something other than that kind of enforcer tough guy. So when you take a look at it, I don't think Wilson has anything to prove. I think that Rempe has a lot to prove. And I think that if the time is right, I do think a fight could happen. But I think at the end of the day, if it happens, it's going to be on Tom Wilson's terms. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And you can tell I'm still trying to overcome this cold. And I want to thank all of you that are bearing with me as I'm trying to get back to 100% health. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.